Before we get to this week's episode of Business Over a Brew, let me tell you about my friends at Roberts Motors. You know, one of our favorite episodes here on the show was when we had a chance to sit down with Sam and John Roberts. If you haven't had a chance to watch that episode, go back and take a look at it. It's great to see the interaction between not only two business partners, but of course father and son as well. They really epitomize what a local business is all about. Number one, doing business the right way, giving back to the community. If you have a chance, you may not buy a car from there, but at least give them the opportunity. Shop robertsmotors.com. You get more at Roberts Motors Ford. More selection, more value. Each vehicle they sell comes with the Roberts Rewards Value Package, which includes oil changes for 2 years, loaner cars, car washes, and much more. Get more at Roberts Motors Ford. Check them out at robertsmotors.com. Now enjoy this week's episode of Business Over a Brew. Welcome to Business Over a Brew, the show where we talk business with some of the Riverbend's most interesting and influential business people, all while enjoying a nice brew at the Great Rivers Tap and Grill inside the Best Western Premier Hotel in Alton. In this episode, we visit with Eddie Horton with Horton's Auto Repair and Outdoor and Dove Technologies. He'll tell us how being in the military and working in the family business prepared him for over a decade of running his own business, and about the development of a new brake pad technology that he recently completed. It's the Business Over a Brew podcast from the Great Rivers Tap and Grill in Alton. Brought to you by Roberts Motors, the value store since 1949. Welcome to Business Over a Brew. I'm your host, Nick Darr. Pleased to be joined in this episode by Eddie Horton, Horton's Auto Repair and Outdoor. Eddie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start here. Just tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up? And tell us about the meandering path to owning an auto repair shop.
Well, it's funny. When I was, I grew up in Edwardsville. I was there 40 years. And when I was younger, it was kind of comical. They told my mother that I was mentally retarded and I could never function outside of anything by myself. I'd have to have people help write my checks, do all this stuff for me, manage my money and all this. And I thought, wow, these people really think I'm an idiot. Well, the truth be told, I was bored out of my mind. And, the little Iowa basic skills test.
I remember that.
Yeah,
yes.
those were terrible. Yeah. So they just killed me. So I would take this test and I'd make smiley faces with the dots. I mean, it's blatantly obvious. I wasn't reading the little booklet. It's not like I tried to answer these. So somebody out there was actually dumber than me because they thought that was real. So, later on, I didn't try real hard when I was in high school because I just thought, well, I've been labeled an idiot. I'll just do anything. And I had one teacher took me aside and said, hey, you know what? Give me 3 good hours of studying tonight and come in tomorrow. Well, I go home. I don't know how to study. I don't even know what this guy's talking about. So I'm like, how do you study? So I called some friends. I go, hey, man, how do you study? What's the concept here? He's like, well, you just read it. I'm like, okay. So I read it, and I kind of wrote it down. I was just reading it. And I did this like 3 times, and then I was just beat. So I went to bed. The next day I go in, and he gives me the test, and I start to read the first question, And I'm like, whoa. Before I got to the end of the question, I knew the answer. I'm like, whoa. So I put it down, And I give it back to him. He says, oh, you missed one. I said, no, I didn't. I said, I knew every one of those. I stayed up last night, and I studied, like you told me. I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, you didn't put your name on it. I was like, oh, yeah. I was a little excited about that. But, I struggled all through school. And then when I got to college, it was a college, / trade school, and I went in there. I did real well, I excelled at everything I did. I learned real quick that wasn't nothing wrong with me. It was the system. Like a lot of people, it fails them. Mm-hmm. So I got out. All my friends went in the military. I went to school. I got out of school. Worked for my parents. They had an automotive repair business. Okay. It was Illinois Radiator. I worked for them for a long time. After going in the military, I got out, worked at a couple different places trying to find where I actually fit in because transitioning from the military to civilian life is extremely hard for me. And I struggled with a lot of it. And finally got married and had kids and thought, you know what? It's time to get a big boy job. These little jobs I've been doing, they've been great, and they paid okay. I didn't care for, it just wasn't enough money, and it was nowhere. It was going nowhere.
Right.
They were nowhere jobs. I mean, they were okay jobs. I made okay money, but there was no room for advancement or anything. I got to talking to my wife. I said, my dad's not going to retire. He's just not going to. So we're waiting for him to retire to open the business, our own part of the business. So we opened up our family part of the business about 12 years ago. And, we worked out of our garage for a while, about 3 or 4 years. And finally it outgrew the garage. We got a building, and we started working. Well, we was in Cottage Hills for a year. And then the lady that we was leasing from, she didn't want to renew the lease. She wanted to sell the building. And it was too much for us. I couldn't afford it at the time. I said, well, we'll just have to leave. So we left the building we're in now on Prairie Street in Bethalto. We bought that, and that's no leasing. It's awesome. I just do what I want to do. I don't have to ask permission. And if something breaks, a heater or something, I don't got to call somebody, say who's going to fix it. We just fix it.
Right.
So that's actually been really good. But we've been there now for, about 11 years, a little over 11 years now. We've been there on Prairie Street.
Well, obviously, we're going to delve into your business. What was so difficult about the transition from military to civilian life for you?
Well, I was an 18 Delta. I was a Special Forces medic. There's a lot of things you see in the military that you don't want anybody else to ever see. There's things you do that are not some of your proudest moments. Mm-hmm. The hardest thing for me was coming out when you're in the military. I mean, if somebody's an idiot, you can tell them you're an idiot, and it's okay. They can't fire you. That's the great thing. And but when you get into the civilian arena and you got a job, if your boss is a moron, you can't tell them that because they'll fire you.
Brutal honesty is not as accepted.
And some of the other stuff was the not respect, but the lack of discipline on most civilians. I mean, especially the younger generation. I got out, I was like 32, 33 when I got out, and I would go into a restaurant and see somebody just being disrespectful in a restaurant, being dressed inappropriately, whether it be a girl or a boy. And I really struggled with that. I was like, this is unacceptable behavior. When you're on a military installation, the kids on a military installation, they don't do those things. They might say they're going to do them, but they don't actually do them because their parents would kill them. Because you get when you're in the military, if your spouse screws up, if your kids are screw ups, you're held responsible. The kids and the spouse are not held responsible. That falls back on you. You're supposed to be the person in charge. You're the one that's supposed to know better. You know what can and can't be done. So when I got out, I still had a lot of that in me, and it was really hard to transition to, the civilian side of it.
Let's talk about what was it like working in your parents' shop growing up? Man,
let me tell you what. I wish everybody on the planet could work with their family just once in their life. So my dad is my stepdad. Him and my mom got married while I was in college, a very long time ago. And so I'd go to work, and when I went to work first time, my mom says, "Hey, listen, that is your stepbrother over there. That's Joe's son, but he doesn't talk a whole lot and stuff. So just kind of be easy with him." And I'm like, she's like, "Yeah, because you never shut up." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So me and him became really great friends. We did everything, at the shop together. We worked everything. We didn't do anything afterwards. When he'd go home, he went home, and when I went home, but we talked about everything, and we had a lot of fun at the shop. And my dad built my mother a small kitchenette at the shop, and she would make lunch for us, and we would all four of us would sit down and eat. And sometimes a customer would come in that's a good customer, a friend of ours or something, and they'd have lunch with us, So this was every day for years, I mean, I went there in '88, and it was '96 when I went in the military when I left there, and then I came back. And I worked with him after I got back for years. And it was just amazing all the time. We always had a good time, I mean, we had our differences and stuff like that, like families do. But man, it was always great because my mom was there, my dad was there, my brother was there, and we just we hung out and we worked on cars.
So many businesses, local businesses especially, are family businesses, and I think there is something to be said for a family working together for a common goal that would benefit all of you.
It's just you can't get that when everybody comes home from different jobs and schools and they come home and they have dinner. And I think that's a great thing when they do that. Family dinners are lost.
Right.
And at our house, we try to really do a lot of family dinners as much as we can. And if we can't do family dinners, Saturdays is known as, that's our big breakfast. We have breakfast together. So the kids aren't allowed to go out and spend the night somewhere on Friday night. If they want to have friends, they got to come to our house. Because we're going to have that breakfast on Saturday morning. And I never let that get away from me. But now the kids are getting older and be teenagers.
Right.
They're wanting to go spend nights. So I'm struggling with, man, do I still hold true to that, thing, or
we had
make
to move
them
ours
stay
to,
there,
We had to move ours to Sunday dinner. There's no really excused absences from Sunday
And
dinner.
I think that's great that people do that, because if you don't have a business where you work every day with these people, then you start losing touch with your kids, man, and next thing you know it, they're off in college, man, and getting married, and you're like, man, I don't even remember when you were 16.
Right.
It's because you didn't see them when they were 16,
Going back to I think there's two types of people. There's either people that hate working on cars,
right,
or people that love working on cars. I guess for you, was it love right away?
Oh yeah, I knew when I was, man, 8, 9 years old. I loved working on cars. I loved cars. I mean, my parents hated me because I would take things apart. I'm like, man, this VCR doesn't work anymore. Got to get a screwdriver. And if I couldn't fix it, then I would just put all the parts back inside and then put the cover back together, and that was it. I'm like, they'll never know.
Didn't work anyway. So.
Plug it in, it starts smoking. Like, they might notice that, So I was always taking stuff apart. Always thinking I could make something better, and never made it better when I was a kid. Always made it worse.
Well, you have, though. We'll continue all that a little bit later. But I always like to ask people, what was your feeling the night before or the day before you opened your business? How were you, take us back to that day.
It wasn't the night before. For me, it was the morning of. So we were in our first building, which was in Cottage Hills, and there's an apartment above it. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't afford to drive 2 cars back. We lived in Livingston. I couldn't afford to drive from Livingston to Cottage Hills every day, 2 cars. I'm like, this is it's gonna eat me alive. I don't got a bunch of money. I got to really conserve it, So I wake up that morning and well, I mean, how you wake up in the morning, you don't have a lot of clothes on, so I'm standing there in my underwear and looking in this huge mirror on the wall, and I'm like, oh my God, I have no job. I have very little funds, I'm $500,000 in debt. I mean,
no customers.
And the thing is, people don't realize how much debt they're in until they start adding up the cars and the house and, and all this stuff and your kids and everything. I'm like, I'm $500,000 in debt. I got no job. I have no income of any kind. My wife works with me, so she doesn't have a job. And I have 2 kids and a beagle. I mean, what could go wrong? Besides, everything.
Right.
I was scared to death. I was like, oh my. And I went downstairs, and that's another thing when you own a business. When you go down to unlock that door, if you have a stick and mortar building, like I do, when you go to unlock that door, when you go there in the morning, you can't make people walk through that door.
Right.
You can't. I mean, you can do all the advertising you want to do. You can talk to your blue in the face to everybody on the planet. But that doesn't mean they're going to come through that door. And I have a lot of friends that I've never worked on their cars. I don't know why. Maybe they've been going somewhere that their family went to forever.
Sure.
But, and that really shows you, it's like, you can't make them come here,
Right.
So.
Do you remember your first customer?
My first customer, yeah. Did
you get one the first day?
I got one the first day. The first day we were there, a guy 2 doors down rides his broken lawnmower down, and it's like a 1972 wheel horse lawnmower. It's beat to death. And I was like, how you doing today? I said, is there something we can do for you? And he's like, my lawnmower don't work. okay. I said, nothing could be more vague than that,
Right.
What's wrong with it? It's broke. Still extremely vague, I seen you drive it up, so is there something going on with the deck that the blades are not coming on or something? Yep. I said, all right, well, if you want to leave it here, and I don't even know what to say to these people. I haven't done this yet.
Right.
So I get out a paper, I get out one of our tickets, and I start filling it out, and I ask him all these questions about, when was the last time it worked? What sounds did it make? What, kind of like being at the doctor's office. It's basically the same thing. You're getting a sample history on this piece of equipment. And he looks at me with the straightest face and he goes, why are you asking me so many questions? He's like, can't you just fix it? I'm like, well, but if I don't know what's wrong and I don't know, did you hit something? Because I ask a lot of questions on equipment and cars when we fix them. Anything, the thing is, nobody knows their equipment or their vehicle better than the owner.
Right.
So as much information as I can gather, it makes my job easier and it makes the diagnostic time a lot shorter. So, some people though, they don't like answering all the questions,
Right.
So it make, he left, we fixed it, he came back and drove it down the road. And the funny thing is I could hear him going down the road. He was turning the blades on and off as he's going down the road, make sure they're working. I'm like, well, I mean, at least he checked it,
Right, yeah.
But he was just making sure that we did fix what we said we fixed.
Sure. So you've been at it over a decade now. Was there a moment where you thought, okay, we're going to make it?
Yeah. So I went to some companies that had fleets, and I said, we could probably help you out. And I said, I know where you're getting your work done now, and I know it's very expensive, and they're a huge place. We're not that much cheaper than they are, but it's a more personalized service, and I'm going to be able to do service calls for you on your lot. Mm-hmm. And they had about 35 trucks, and they were juice delivery trucks, and it was Folsom Distributing.
Okay,
and
sure.
we went there, and I remember sitting there in front of him, and he's just staring at me, and I'm like scared to death. I'm thinking, oh my God, what is he going to say? Why is he looking at me like this? And we went to church at the same church, so I knew him.
Right.
I was still nervous sitting there talking
Sure.
to him, because this is a totally different arena. We're not at church,
Right.
we're at work. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, he said, let's do that. I was like, man, I went flying back to the shop. I told him, I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, I just locked down Folsom. I said,
Wow.
They're going to start using us. And once we started using them, it started really growing. It started growing really fast. And then people found out that we did radiators, heater cores, gas tanks, lawnmowers, small engines, the four-wheelers. That's why we named it outdoor, auto and outdoor, because the outdoor part of it is, I don't care what you got. If it's a piece of equipment that goes outside, we'll work on it. Mm-hmm. If you got a lawn chair that's steel and it breaks and you need it welded, bring it up. We'll weld it for you. Anything that's outdoor. Because people always ask me, what's outdoor mean? And I'm like, anything.
Right.
Just covers anything.
And you really have, just talking a little bit to you yesterday and before the show,
Mm-hmm.
you've got that entrepreneurial spirit. I know also owner of Dove Technologies. Talk a little bit about that company.
So Dove Technologies came about because we were working on minivans, brakes. Mm-hmm. And we had a couple customers that were going through brakes like constantly. Every year we were putting brakes back on these things. And they were under warranty, so it wasn't bad for the customer. It was just a, inconvenience to have to come in and have it done.
Right.
And I kept looking at these things, and just one day out of the blue, I told my wife, I said, you know what? I think I can fix this problem. And like I told you, I've always thought I can make it better. So I thought,
right,
I can fix this. So we went on. It took me a lot of broken fingers and cuts and bruises and burns, and we finally came up with a brake pad that alleviated the problems that we were having. And we have a technology that it's a very ignored part of the brake pad. It's the backing plate. Nobody ever pays any attention to it because it's just a soft piece of metal. It's mild steel. Well, we went after that mild steel and we thought we were going to do something with it, and we did. It's great technology. It can be applied to any brake pad on the market. The hardest thing now is, it took us 4.5 years to get a patent on it. but we have a full utility patent on it, and that was big for us. Now getting it to industry, now you go out, you talk to these companies, and as I said earlier, they're making $50 million selling brakes. Just a good number. And you come in and say, hey, I want you to buy this technology and apply it to your brake pads. I want you to spend $10 million on campaigns and making new commercials and trying to get this out there.
Right.
If I'm making $50 million already, why do I want to mess with you? I don't need that money, and I don't want to spend money on trying to promote a new product. So that's what we've been running into a lot. They know they're better. We've run into one company that knows they're better. They tested them. They turned it down because, like I said, they didn't want to spend the money is what they told us. We're nervous that they're going to try to make them anyway. Excuse me. But my attorney said, just let them do it.
Yeah.
He said, we'll just clean their clock when they start making them. He said, then we'll show them how serious we are.
Well, it's an interesting concept. Just a couple minutes left. One kind of final question. What's one thing that everybody should know about your business, but they don't?
One thing that everybody should know about our business is that we're a Christian-based business. Everything we do, I always feel like God's watching me, like your dad, like your mom. She always knows when you screw up.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, man, I know he's watching. So we never cut corners, and we're always extremely honest with our customers and upfront with them. We try to make sure they know everything that we know when we know it.
Well, I know our friend Mike Weller, who's been a guest on the show. We appreciate you wearing the AP cigar shirts.
Yes, he is a very good friend of mine.
Hopefully Joe got a good close-up of the shirt.
Yeah, AP cigar, man, that's my boy there.
Right.
If you're not getting your cigars, this is one of my commercial
quick
things.
Plug for AP? Okay.
Yeah, if you're not getting your cigars from Mike Weller at AP Cigar, you're getting them at the wrong place.
We'll send you a bill, Mike, for that commercial. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
If somebody wants to get a hold of you, needs to have some work done, how do they do that?
They can get a hold of us at the phone number 618-377-6900. They can call anytime. We got a new phone system now, so it'll go right through my cell phone, so they can always leave a message, and we'll get back to them as soon as we can.
Great. Well, continued success to you. Best of luck with the brake pads, and thanks for being on Business Over Brew.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.